You know what? This is a nice slot for us to have. We're normally later in the week. We're normally after
Bloody Marys.
Exactly. So Nina and I are very excited today for a couple reasons. We've got an amazing person here to be with us on stage who she'll introduce in just a second. Sam asked earlier how many of you were here for your first time. I'm going to ask a different question. How many people make a living off of real estate data in one way, shape, or another? All right. Now, hands down, how many people in the room are actually real estate brokers? Wait, I see 3, 4, 5. First of all, thank you for coming. It's a rare breed, but that's what we do. That's what our work group is about. There is this disconnect, right, between the brokers and the technology community because they don't always speak the same language that we do. And broker advisory, for those couple hands that were up there, or if you know a broker that should come in and partake and be part of our work group, it's a safe place. We don't speak tech, but what we do is help translate that into things that other work groups like R&D and that can pick up. Yep. And some of that evolves from policy. Some of that helps direct policy, even though RESO isn't really a policy, forward type body, but also sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, the roster data isn't getting to where it needs to go. And those things come out of what our work group does on a regular basis. So I encourage you to be part of it. We only meet every couple months. It's a pretty low lift. The other thing I would ask too is, again, if you know a broker that's having a problem, please direct them to us, him or her, because we can help get that conversation going. So with that, I think I'm going to let you.
Super excited to introduce our Broker Spotlight speaker. He is one of the most vocal and candidly refreshing voices in the industry today. If you've listened to his podcast or you've seen him on stage, you know that he does not shy away from the tough conversations. So please help me give a warm RESO welcome to James Dwiggins.
That was a fun song.
That was a fun song.
Yeah, that's confused. Millennials, that's a movie that's a little bit old. Never mind, forget it.
So James,
yeah.
NextHome, why be a part of RESO? Like, why are data and data standards important on the brokerage side?
Yeah, so I'll start with background. Run a franchise in addition to all the public stuff that I'm doing. We have about 630 offices across the US. We're in all 50 states, and we're part of about 230 to 240 MLSs. And I've also been in the business my entire life, literally. So I've seen this move from a book, I know we're in a data room, but a book, to a DOS-based system called Boris. Anybody remember that? Just curious. Mm-hmm. A few smiles and laughs in the back, okay. And to the MLS system we have today. And so as someone who's experienced the change and growth of this business, there weren't data standards, to put it bluntly. There was nothing a long time ago, and those standards have developed over time. And as somebody who's developed software, I've done a couple of prop tech companies in my career. When you're trying to integrate with MLSs all over the United States and nobody has some sort of standard format, it can be very, very challenging, especially for startups to try and come into the space. And so the whole idea behind the data dictionary and putting some standards out there makes it easier for companies to compete, makes it easier for startups to put new technology in place. We have a lot of challenges still, and we have a lot of ways to go still, but we've made a significant amount of progress. And it's something I talk about a lot, and we have to do, I think, sometimes a better job as an industry of educating new people that come into this space on how things were versus what it is today, because we have lots of challenges, but where we are today is significantly better than what it was a long time ago. So for us, so I employ engineers on staff, just for some context. We build a lot of our own technology in-house at our franchise, while we also partner with third-party companies. And we literally have 2 engineers whose job is to just work with MLS data changes, working through those changes, the different standards that come out, and it's important. Like it's how we're going to be able to make things easier from a technology perspective, and as we get more innovation into the space, allow brokers to be competitive. I'll leave one other comment. it's hard for companies in the space where we have decreasing margins to compete. We're faced with significant challenges between all of the lawsuits that have occurred. I was a named defendant in those lawsuits. I've been through that litigation where we've depleted a lot of our reserves. We're trying to figure out how to work in a market where we've got 4 million home sales when we average 5.3 million. And so technology development and innovation, when we've got large companies in the space that have floors and floors of engineers and innovation, how do we compete with that from a brokerage and franchisor is something we're thinking about all the time.
So one of the things that you mentioned earlier is that some of the work you're doing on the data side, you have engineers that are kind of working to do that. A lot of brokerages don't have that capability, and they are relying on third-party products. What are some of the pitfalls that you're seeing from the integration side, from scale as a brokerage in many different markets, for those brokerages in particular that are not developing their own products?
Well, I mean, the hard part about working with third-party providers, and I say that lovingly because I know a lot of you are in the room, is they have a roadmap that they want to develop on. They've got a plan, they've got budgets. That may not line up completely with what we want to do or where our vision goes. And so when you don't have your own engineering team that can control some of this stuff, like our view is we control our own company data, our internet, our reporting system, our accounting systems that work with our franchisees, that's all built in-house. We don't outsource any of that at all. We bring data in, we control that, we call ourselves the hub, and then the spokes are our third-party providers. So it allows us to be a little more flexible with that. But when you latch on to just a third-party product, you're at the mercy of what they're wanting to do. And that can be a problem depending upon what new tech company comes into the space, how you're going to compete with somebody else. So those are issues with that. But also there's a cost benefit for that, right? I mean, employing engineers and trying to develop stuff in-house, you're not only building out technology, but you're also trying to maintain that technology platform. It gets very expensive. So look, the brokerage business, and you'll hear me say this a lot, there's a lot of challenges coming to this, and we're in the first inning of it. We have a lot of fights that have been happening, certainly I've been vocal on. But if you look at what's happening to this space and where all of you in this room should be paying attention, you have very significant capital coming into this industry from a different perspective, mortgage coming into the residential real estate space. And a lot of the companies in this space have been very clear about what their intentions are. Cut the real estate transaction cost in half. And a significant portion of that is the brokerage side. And so I think you're going to see even more pressure on the brokerage space to figure out how to be profitable in a margin where agents keep almost all of that money, brokerages don't. There's a reason why the word broke is in brokerage. So, I mean, I'm sort of funny, but I'm being serious. It's the reality is it's a very tough space. Ancillary services are going to be important. And if you look at where the innovation's occurring, you all know this, the end-to-end solution has been talked about for as long as I've been in the business. But you've got companies that are getting closer to this. You've got Zillow with its super app. You've got Rocket coming into the space, their acquisition of Redfin, and now Mr. Cooper. To me, that's the biggest threat out of anything in the space that's going to cause innovation to change and at a quick pace. That company figures out how to service loans and get an 83% recapture rate on those loans they're servicing, where they can now bring it back to their agents, their title rep, all of those services. That's going to be a significant pressure on the space and, candidly, all of us and how we innovate. I think it's a race to this ecosystem and a race to how you keep the consumer engaged. So to answer your question, it's going to be very difficult for franchisors and brokerages to compete in that. They don't have the budgets. And secondarily, even third-party companies where you're trying to get us to write checks, and the reality is we just paid a bunch of lawyers all of our cash over the past 18 months, and now we're trying to refill our coffers. So it's a tough time, and it's going to continue to be tough for a while until the real estate market recovers.
Yeah, one of my mentors used to say, nobody makes any money if the broker gets broker, so that's always a challenge.
Nobody makes any money when you've got class action lawyers trying to get yachts.
There's that too. There's no yacht owners in this room that I'm aware of, so maybe an airplane owner or two. But I think a lot of what you said, though, comes to the fact that brokerages are looking differently about their data and what they do with it and how they move forward. Like, how has your vision of brokerage data maybe shifted as you see the market evolve?
Well, I mean, I've seen these analogies that data is the new oil, and I think that's fair with, all of the AI and large language models. The problem, by the way, if any of you can figure out how to get an agent to read an email, you'll be the most innovative person on the planet. So, I mean, the reality is data in, data out. So, I'm excited about a lot of the innovation that's happening, but at the same time, I have concerns on how we're able to get the right data from our people and then how we can create new systems from that. But I'll give you an example of a use case. So most of you know that I'm involved in a startup called RESO, and one of the things that we're doing is to create a new blue ocean of data where we're actually tracking the workforce. See, every brokerage in this room, and there's only a few of you, and franchisor has absolutely no idea what our agents are doing on a daily basis. Not a clue. We have no idea where they're spending their money. We have no idea where they're spending their time. We have no idea what they are doing. But imagine a world now where we're actually tracking the realtor. We're seeing how long it takes them to write a purchase contract when it should take 20 minutes and taking 40 minutes. I can flag a manager and say, you've got a training issue here with somebody new. I can see where your expenditures are and baseline those expenditures and go, we've noticed that an agent doing these 5 things has a 25 basis point higher comp than everyone else. When you start to look at the data sets of the workforce, I think there's some really interesting things there, and that's something that RESO is very focused on. But it's not new. If you think about how Amazon operates, they literally track their drivers on every single stop down to every detail. They know how long it should take to get through the route, when a driver's not moving as quickly, where that vehicle is at every single point in time. So this new data that I think that the industry will have access to and how we use that data can create new systems and create more efficiencies, which I think will be really important as we move into this new future. I'm not shy about the fact I think we have too many realtors. We got 1.5 million people. Depending upon the stat you talk about from the MLS, 70% of them didn't do a single transaction. Whatever the number is, the reality is there's too many people to sell 4 million houses. That needs to be cut down. A brokerage can be more efficient and be more profitable, reduce your overhead, have your workforce be more efficient, have them doing more activities, see where the inefficiencies are that you can get rid of, and the business becomes more profitable over time. I think that's the future where we're headed, for sure.
So one of the things that you, one of the things that you, that we're talking about here is the access to data and having the data, but you've been really vocal about the lack of data when it's surrounding comps, MLSs, off market. What do you think is going to happen in the future surrounding the lack of information? Well,
look, I had an interview with a Bloomberg reporter today on this, in case you haven't heard, there's this debate on clear cooperation policy going on. We talked about, he actually asked this question, he says, was a watershed moment in residential real estate when we came out with IDX? And if you think about it, you're probably like, no, but actually it is. It was a time where we've created a marketplace where every agent, every brokerage, no matter what it is, had the ability to display almost all of listings available in a market. And we provided that information to the consumer. We gave them all of this data. We've added data. Portals have added data on top. We've created the greatest marketplace on the planet. How many of you have ever bought real estate outside the United States? Just curious. Anyone here? How many of you have ever searched for real estate outside the United States? Okay. For me, when I ever have a reporter talk to me, I go try to find a property for sale in Spain or France or go to other countries where there is no multiple listing service and watch what that experience is like. And why I say that is transparency and information I think is important. This argument is so stupid to me. We live in a world where you can go on AutoTrader or CarGurus and every car dealership in America has their vehicles there. Go to Facebook Marketplace, you've got when the item was listed, how long, any price reductions that have occurred. It can be the same thing on eBay. We've created transparency to provide information. When you take that information away, we create systems that are fragmented. And I know what this was like because I was here when there was an MLS book printed once a month every 30 days. And you had to be a member to see what was available in a printed book. When we talk about off MLS deals that aren't on the multiple listing service, I don't know how the hell you're supposed to do your comps, especially if that number continues to grow. Now, I remember in Silicon Valley, I remember in 2013, I ran a different company at the time, 30% of the inventory was off MLS, sold off MLS. And it was a massive issue. And so to me, there are things that I think we have to think about, and I've been very vocal about this. If you want to do off MLS deals, like we have a big debate on it, but every single multiple listing service in this country should mandate that those deals are put back on the MLS at the close of that deal. So we've got that information to work with so that we can all work off the same sheet of music, which, by the way, affects appraisals, comps, et cetera. This information that we're collecting, if we fragment it where brokers only have that information and it's only in 8 different company sites, the way for you to aggregate data is going to go from MLSs and RESO to trying to aggregate data from all these different brokerages. Good luck. Because these systems, half the companies use are so archaic, I couldn't even begin to tell you how bad it is.
Yeah, I mean, well, then how do we address seller privacy?
Seller privacy, I'm going to give you 2 examples. And if I can give you anything today to walk away with, these are some important things to consider. The seller privacy issue is a farce, and it has been from the beginning. It's a talk track that's been made up to generate profit inside a company. The end. Because seller privacy exists. How many MLSs in the room, just so I can see context? Do you all have the ability to remove the address in the MLS for privacy purposes? Yes, I'm pretty sure that's been there for a long period of time, okay? If you look at 2 use cases, and I want to give you an example of this because I have a vacation home that I have on Airbnb and VRBO. These are 2 great use cases you should look at. So in Airbnb's case, they don't show the address of any homeowner. Obviously, they're unoccupied properties. The same thing with VRBO, but they handle it differently. In VRBO's case, they don't actually allow you to zoom in either to see where the property is located. And they control the zoom level of the geolocation. On Airbnb's case, they allow you to zoom in a little bit too much to show that. If we are genuinely concerned about seller privacy, if that's the honest conversation we're having, then remove the address and control the zoom level. Nobody can figure out where the property is. It is perfectly legal to have the front photo of a house. Public domain, you have no control over that, which is why Street View exists for Google. And if it's a private property that's genuinely concerned about privacy, it's behind a freaking gate already anyway. You can't see the front of the house. So to me, these are conversations wrapped up out of a different motive. But I do think we should have that conversation about seller privacy. And if there's a way to do it better, and I think VRBO is a great use case of this, then give the ability to do that and then educate the agents who, by the way, if I put even 5,000 of my 6,000 people in a room and asked them if they knew that the address could be removed from the MLS, I'll bet you most of them don't know that exists today. Guaranteed. Because it's not a question that typically comes up from sellers, by the way. It's only brought up if the agent brings it up to the seller in a conversation. Less than 1% of sellers bring up a conversation about privacy. But we do need to address these use cases because it is public conversation, and I think there's great ways to solve those without going to the part where we're harming sellers in the experience.
Right.
So.
Or harming ourselves, right?
You know, we've gone such a round robin through some of the questions that we've had. I guess from the standard standpoint, and you've touched on this a little bit, but in a world where it is fragmented, where it's not going to more data and more access, like how does a brokerage operate in that type of environment? Like as someone who's building, like you're collecting data sets that don't exist, and I'm guessing that you already have pain points with discovering things that you could already use more from the MLS or from traditional spaces. Like what happens when that gets more fragmented?
I mean, the fragmentation of the business, we go back to the way it was. I don't know how to put it any more clearly. I put this in an op-ed I did, and it was being very vulnerable about it because it's not something I'm like, I like to tell publicly that my family profited from holding inventory from the system. That's what it is. That's what it was 40 years ago. My grandfather, it was all big brokers. And they didn't share inventory unless they couldn't sell it internally. That's the market that it was 40 years ago. My family became wealthy because of it. My family also changed it because they knew it was wrong. And so they were involved in creating the MLS at that time. But a fragmented marketplace does nothing to help consumers. And you're going to bring back fair housing issues. You're going to see fair housing issues, you're going to see steering, and you're going to see redlining that we've worked so damn hard to get rid of over the past 40 years. And a fragmented marketplace makes it difficult for everybody. The businesses operating, sellers getting the best price possible, home buyers being able to find the inventory that's actually for sale instead of having to search for different websites. What about buyer representation? And that's a conversation we're not having deeply enough. You know, if I can only see it by working with an agent in that particular brokerage, how is that choice? These are really big conversations that people are not having a deep enough. They're having it behind closed doors, we're not having it publicly. And it doesn't take long to see how history can repeat itself. But that data fragmentation becomes something, I don't know how we innovate. I think we go backwards. But to go to the other part of your conversation, we also need to innovate forward. I'll give you an example of data that I think is something we have to continue to address. The MLS has a significant amount of data now. But there's lots of use cases where we need to innovate further. For example, when you buy a property today, you don't actually know what the propane costs might be for that home in the wintertime or the summertime to heat it or air condition it. And so that might be like where I have a house in the mountains in the Sierras. The propane cost, because it snows a lot, because I was an idiot when I bought it and didn't do my research, is like $1,000 a month. Fortunately, I can afford it, but maybe the average person couldn't. So there's things that we're continuing to look at from a data perspective that we need to aggregate, and I think the MLS should be the absolute central repository for that, and then provide that back out to the consumer in any way, shape, or form they can. But talking about data standards, if I may, you know, we're in a place now where there are really big issues here that, and I apologize to any NAR people in the room, I'm always supporting NAR, but really dumb decisions were made regarding demo. And I'm gonna be blunt about it. The delayed marketing exempt listing status was not thought through on implementation. It wasn't. Because I'll give you an example. So I aggregate 230 different MLS feeds or IDX feeds. My partner Inside Real Estate for a lot of my website technology also uses IDX feeds. Well, with demo status, I'm calling it demo by the way, it's now the only way to get all the inventory is through a VOW feed. So delayed marketing exempt listings will be in the VOW feed unless an MLS wants to get sued by the DOJ. So it's going to get thrown in VOW feeds. Well, VOW feeds require an entirely different user interface on the product, as you all know. They're also a different MLS feed and probably different contractual agreements with the MLS. And in my experience, those feeds typically cost more. So an example of not thinking through policy on implementation, now we have a spot by September, we've got to move 6,000 people's product, 230 MLSs to a different type of feed, a different contract. And by the way, brokers aren't going to absorb that fee difference. MLS is in the room, you got a big problem ahead of you. Because there's going to be a fight between your cost structure for VOW and brokers' ability to absorb any more money than they already have, which they got sued into oblivion. And so we aren't having a deep enough discussion about policy and how it affects real-world experience on these things. And it's kind of like, as I think the words were, Godspeed was words used last time for MLS implementation. I feel like we're back at the same part again. New policy, Godspeed MLSs. The difference is this time is brokers are really in a tough spot.
Well, and to that, I mean, I think a lot of MLSs are waiting for this, right? We're waiting to kind of see some of the court of public opinion way out. We're kind of waiting to see some of the FAQs emerge. But I mean, as someone who's in multiple markets, you're probably facing a situation where those 200 some odd MLSs are probably implementing later rather than sooner. So you're probably
Indifferent.
And different.
Is it 7 days? Is it 14 days? Is it 30 days? Who influenced them? What does that mean? How do we display that? Like, I mean, I'm not shy about it. I wasn't a fan of the policy. I think that open markets are better. I think having inventory accessible to people is better. There's no benefit to office exclusives except for the brokerage, period, the end. It does not benefit a seller unless you put a property on the open market. I love this conversation about, well, they got the price. Yeah, your seller doesn't know what the home is worth until everybody's had a chance to write an offer on it. Like, that's the reality of how that works. And so it's like, well, they got the price. Yeah, and if I was to offer $400,000 more, you think the seller's going to walk away from that? No. So we're in this spot where this industry needs to think strategically ahead on how we're going to serve our customer, which is the consumer. And if we lose sight of that, then this thing falls apart for tech vendors in the room, for MLSs, for brokerages, and for agents. If the consumer doesn't trust us anymore, it's game over. That's how we end it.
You know, you're talking about brokerages, and I think that there are a lot of brokerages. I mean, there's some handful of brokerages in the room. A lot of them are not paying attention to data standards. What would you say to those brokerages that are kind of sitting on the sidelines, not really implementing data standards? What would you say to them?
I mean, I think they need to look at it from, look, we're in America, we're about capitalism, and I respect that. Like, I totally get it, and I'm not about more government regulation. It's not my thing, but you need to be thinking about this from who are the players on the chessboard? What moves are they making? How do you affect your business so that you can operate and competitively? Like, I'm all about competition, but fairly. Yeah. And at the same time, we need to be thinking about how the market might look if these things happen. Like, this is the conversation I have with some of these agents who are promoting, office exclusives extensively. I'm like, well, what are you going to do if 30% of the inventory isn't on the MLS and it was sold off MLS? And you've got a comp that sold 23% below market because it was done off the market. The seller had no idea what the house was worth. And now that's a new comp that you've got to adjust for. That's a real world story, by the way. This is a real thing that just happened where a company both listed it, sold it internally, which I guarantee you is going to end up being a lawsuit at some point when the seller finds out their house sold for 23% below any comp on the market. But now, by the way, that's a new comp. And so every single agent in that company is going to have to overcome that conversation, explain that, so the appraisers. So there are real world things that are happening with these decisions and that will affect every single person that's involved in this subject. Everybody's affected by it. And I think we have to stop thinking short term and think long term about what we're trying to create so that we don't take the system down. How many of you were in here, by the way, just for curiosity, before the MLS? Just for conversation's sake. Before the multiple listing service was digital. Got a few. Okay. I would encourage you to, those people that raised their hands today, have a conversation with them about what the world looked like before what we've created today. And they'll tell you what that was like. This innovation that you're all able to create that I'm a huge fan of, that we should be doing, it comes to a stop if the market data becomes fragmented. It just does. Because brokers don't have any standards internally either, by the way. There is no data standard internally in a company.
That is true.
And you're gonna lose this ability. I wanted to make two other comments, though, just I think is important. I've said this when I was at another event. MLSs need to be thinking about how to make things easier for prop tech companies, too. There needs to be a process.
No argument from this crowd.
And I apologize to MLS executives. I know we're all friends, but look, if we're gonna innovate, and we're going to create really cool technology that pushes the industry forward, you've got to break down the barriers. You've got to make it easier for companies to be able to access data. Come up with different models. I don't care what those models are, but a prop tech startup that's got minimum funding can't afford half the MLS fees it's charged to access data. So give a different idea. Like, maybe do it where you take a position in the company. Come up with a different way that they can get access to build cool tech. To give us, by the way, and I want everyone to hear this last comment, the broker, franchisor, and agent ability to compete in a market where you've got Wall Street capital that wants to remove and fire my people from the business. That's right. Give us the ability to innovate faster. Let us work with new prop tech companies in a fashion that we can afford to do it so that we're able to push and keep the agent at the center of the transaction. Because I think most of you in here make money off realtors, would assume to some way, shape, or form. And if they're not making money and they can't do their job, then we all fail in this business. So I would encourage MLSs to think differently and strategically. I love the idea of take a position. If you can't afford your fee, take a capital position or an equity position in it. Come up with ways to get them to innovate so that they can do new things in the space, and this whole industry gets better long term. So.
All kinds of knowledge. We are almost out of time, but I know you are a very busy man, flying all over the country, doing all of the things, but also championing brokerages, the industry, MLSs, associations. So we are very grateful for that. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
And thank you for showing up.
Appreciate that very much. Thanks, everybody.